Hawatlo, Ritnuk Marnie Atkins, Yil Sulatluk, Yil Wiyot, Jaru Gigi Dadadali. My name is Marnie Atkins. I am a Sulatluk person, a Wiyot person, and I'm from Jaru Gigi, which is now known as Eureka, California. Today I'm going to speak with you about some of our history, some of our food items that we used to eat and still eat, and even some fun games that we used to play and we still play today. So to get started, I want to talk about our ancestral lands. Our ancestral territory runs from the north, Plet Cosamalium, which is now known as the Little River, and it's really around just north of McKinleyville. There's a river, and that river, well, it's not too much of a river anymore, unfortunately, just due to contemporary impacts. But if you can imagine a free-flowing river with lots of activity, it was a major trading location because you could go out into the ocean quite easily, as well as up into the hills. You could go upriver. And then we go down into the south to just past Ferndale, Bear River Ridge, and that's called Wiyot. And recently, we had a wind developer try to develop on that ridge, and that's actually one of our sacred places. And, you know, we were in negotiations with them to move, but they insisted on keeping it there. And so through different mechanisms and permitting processes and things like that, we were able to let folks know how very important the ridge is, how very important Wiyot is, and we were able to stop that happening, the installing those wind turbines. There's lots of other places you can go and install those. To the west of us is Shu'ur, and that's our name for the ocean and the shoreline. And what I've been told by cultural knowledge bearers and elders is that our ancestral territory not only includes Shu'ur, the shoreline and the ocean, but as far as the eye can see to the horizon. To the east of us, we go to the first set of Guas, which is hills or mountains. So waterways within our ancestral lands are, like I said before, Plet Cosamalium, which is now known as Little River, and Batawat, which is now known as the Mad River, Ikshari, which is now known as Elk River, and the Wiyot, which is now known as the Eel River. Of course, there's estuaries all around too, but those weren't, I guess, large enough, if you will, to be named. And oftentimes, our folks would talk about a place as if a district, for example. So if someone was talking about the Wiyot, which is now known as the Eel River, they might not just be talking about the Eel River. They might actually be talking about sort of the district. That's maybe a contemporary word we can think of, and that all of those villages and houses and things like that around the river would also be considered Wiyot. So you might not have a specific village name, especially if it was maybe home to more families or small, small family groups, but a large village site with, lots of trade and things like that, lots of activities, you might then name that village site. So it really depends on the people and how they wanted to call, what they wanted to call a place. So I wanted to touch really quickly on something interesting. You probably heard early on when I said that one of the names of our rivers is the Wiyot. Well, and we also call ourselves Wiyot people, right? Well, here's what I'm imagining what happened. Years and years and years ago, there was probably some ethnographer or historian or somebody like that tromping along the Wiyot and said, asked the people there, what do you call yourselves? And they probably said what I said earlier, right? Wiyot dadadali. Remember I said Jarujiji dadadali, which means Jarujiji is where I'm from, or Wiyot is where I'm from. And I think that person probably just labeled everybody who spoke the same language Wiyot. So that's how we have that name now. Now it's a federally recognized name. We are on the Federal Register. That is our legal tribal government name. But I want you also to think about that there are multiple locations where we came from. We came from Wigi. So I could just easily say, I am Wigi Dadadalich. I could just as easily say Batawat Dadadalich. So some of us don't remember exactly what village we came from. So instead of maybe saying a specific village name, we might say maybe a district or a location name, such as Batawat, Wiyot, Wiki, Jarujiji, those kinds of terms now. Some families do still have that knowledge, and they might know exactly what village site they came from, which is great. Some of us might not know. And that, if you think about, is the repercussions of colonization. Some information was lost, some information was retained, but together we can all bring our family, our tribal history together and learn from one another. I wanted to touch a little bit on our surrounding indigenous neighbors. We have strong cultural, historical, ceremonial relations with the Tolowa Deni, who are up in what is now known as Del Norte County, the Yurok tribe, the Yurok people, who are also in Del Norte County as well as Humboldt County. We also have similar ties with the Karuk people of northern Humboldt and western Siskiyou counties, the Hupa people, which are over the hill from us. They're also in Humboldt and Trinity counties. And then, of course, to the south of us, the Mattole, the Bear River, and those folks are in Humboldt and Mendocino counties. So if you kind of look at a map, you can see, counties really don't mean anything. Those are contemporary made mapping lines by Euro-Americans. And for us, it really didn't mean anything, but just so you all know, if you try to look into those counties, that's where you'll see those tribal peoples. Before contact with Euro-Americans came, as they came west with their westward expansion, Manifest Destiny, you might have heard of, we folks we lived, right? We lived, we loved, we worked, we gathered resources to feed ourselves and our families and our communities. We made canoes, we made ceremony. We loved each other, we played games, just what normal families do. It's nothing different. In the mid-1800s, when we had contact with Euro-Americans, things became very difficult for Wiyot people and other indigenous peoples in this area, especially with the discovery of gold up in the hills. Unfortunately, our bay, Wigi, was significantly impacted. And the reason why is because it had an open mouth that large ships could easily get in and out of to bring supplies, to take gold, to bring people, that sort of thing. So towns sprung up around the bay quickly. Lands were cleared of redwood trees. There used to be redwood trees, very close up to the shoreline. And Wiyot people were run out of their homes. So they were often burned out, killed, removed, and put in a fort. For example, Fort Humboldt, which is down the road from us here in Jarujiji. And the name for that place in Wiyot is Juwachgari'im. And that means to pull your knees up close. So being held in a corral, hundreds of people, there wasn't a lot of room. And it was a terrible place. People died, people were assaulted. It was a very dark time. Eventually, those Wiyot people were sent up to Tolowa country. So there, as I understand it, there are still some Wiyot people up there that escaped and moved in with the Tolowa people, but most everybody escaped and came back. In February 1860, there was a terrible massacre on Dolowat, which is also known as Indian Island, and it sits in the middle of Wiyot, which is our bay. And it's the center of our world. It's our creation place. That's where we came from. And we were holding our ceremony there. And not just Wiyot people were there, because we often went to other ceremonial dances, especially the type of ceremony where you're setting the world right, where you're setting the world in a good way. So as being setting the world people, right, righting the world people, we hold this ceremony. And different tribal peoples come to our ceremony and we go to theirs. That's traditionally what happened. And so on this night in 1860, February 1860, local people formed a plan to attack the people at the ceremony. So they came over in the dark of night when a lot of people were back on the land to get, new supplies for the next dance. And so most of the people on the island were women and children and elders. When these perpetrators came, that's who they killed. They killed our elders, they killed our women, and they killed our children. Yes, there were some men there, and they were also killed. And not only did they kill Wiyot people, but they killed other tribal people who were also on that island conducting ceremony, trying to right the world. That same night, there were 2 other massacres, one along the mouth of the Wiyot, or Eel River, and the other at Beatmod, a village which is the South Jetty. We're unsure how many people were killed that night, but you could imagine it was in the hundreds. There were survivors, and some are more well-known than others. There was a baby that survived who grew up to be an old man, so we're very thankful for that. There were old people who survived and were able to pass on their information to others, and we're thankful for that. There were older people that survived and were able to have children and families and pass on their information, their knowledge of our culture and our history. And we're very thankful for that as well. But that night, the island fell out of our hands. After that night, we became separated from our homelands in a very real and visceral way. We were unable to live as family units anymore. We were unable to gather and access resources like we were before. We were unable to speak our language to each other as before. We were unable to hold ceremony as before. And this is how it was for a very long time. They did their best to survive, again, to insert themselves into this settler economy, to the new settlers' environment, so that they could survive. They got jobs in the timber industry, in the fisheries industry. They worked at the docks. They worked in people's homes as servants, all to survive. Fortunately, and very quietly, families still passed on what they knew. Some chose to not pass on what they knew, and that was for the protection of their children and their children's children, and so on and so forth. Because look what happened. They were just people living in a world that was theirs and practicing their culture and language and ceremony, and we were devastated by the impacts of colonization. Wiyot families continue to teach quietly and discreetly, and that's why we have been able to document some of our traditional and cultural practices, and we're very thankful for that. We're very lucky that we have written and recorded materials of our language, and we're undergoing language revitalization efforts. And it was in around the 1960s and 70s when folks started to make noise, if you will, about getting the island back. There were people earlier in the years between 1860 and and the 1900s and up into the 50s and 60s, where Wiyot people were trying to figure out ways to get their land back, especially the island, because remember, it's the center of our world. It's our creation place. But it wasn't until around the 60s and 70s that probably it had to do more with the tone of the country, where people were more receptive to Native peoples getting land. Unfortunately, it took until the late 1990s and early 2000s for all of that to come to fruition. But a lot of those folks who were alive in the 60s and 70s and starting that initiative to bring the island home to us were alive, and they got to see that. In 2000, we were able to purchase 1.5 acres on the island. If you come home, you'll be able to see it. It has a large sort of pinkish tan building on it, and that was our 1.5 acres. The island was a mess when we got it. It was a dry dock, so they would bring ships up there, paint it with lead paint, regular paint, gasoline, diesel, batteries, old batteries. There was a whole area of batteries, boat batteries, car batteries, that were shoring up some of the sand on the island. So I don't know if you all know, sea salt, water, seawater, and batteries don't mix. And so how that never caught fire, I do not know. But what it did do is it corroded the batteries, and all of the battery acids drained into the island. So we had a horrible mess to clean up. It actually qualified for Superfund money. I don't know if you know what that is, but what that is, it's a special federal government grant for sites that are so terribly toxic and environmentally unsafe for humans and animals and water that you get special money to do these cleanups. So we underwent over 10 years of cleanup efforts, and actually we still monitor to this day. I can happily say that not only did we clean up that island with the help of many hundreds of volunteers, staff members, the cleanup on the island took thousands of hours and hundreds of people to help, from everyone from staff to volunteers to community organizations helped us clean the island and get rid of those contaminants. I remember seeing people out there in hazmat suits. That's how bad it was. Fortunately, we are now it is all cleaned up, and we have moved into monitoring stage. So we monitor the water quality, and we monitor, we take sort of samples of the sand to make sure that there are no contaminants remaining. And we've gotten really good results for years now. We purchased the 1.5 acres through fundraising and donation efforts. One of our elders created the Wiyot Sacred Site Fund logo. We sold t-shirts. We had Wiyot Sacred Site Fund benefit concerts and art auctions. It was a lot of fun to raise money. It was really hard, but it was a lot of fun. I want to fast forward a little bit to 2004. We were in a situation locally where our tribal chairperson at that time, Cheryl Seidner, wanted to get more of the island back. So she reached out to the mayor at that time, Peter LaValle, and said, "Hey, Mr. LaValle, we'd like to have some of that island back again." And so he thought that was a good idea, but wasn't really sure how that could happen, because as far as we knew, nothing like that had ever happened before, where a city municipality had given back land to a tribe. But really, it was unused land. You can't build on it, the island itself. Whatever is built on the island now, that's all you can ever have on it. So there's no way for us to really have development. So why did the city have it? Through the years, we worked together. We educated the city council about us, who the Wiyot people are, the Wiyot tribe, what the island meant to us. And in 2006, the city of Eureka transferred 40 plus acres to us. And I say plus or minus because it depends on the tide. So sometimes we own more land and sometimes we own less land. It depends on the tide. That was unheard of. We made international news that a city gave land back to a tribe, but it happened. We did it. And it was a wonderful feeling. After the return of the 40 plus or minus acres in 2006, the tribe began to work towards finishing the ceremony that was interrupted in 1860. As the years moved on between 2006, we started to plan together finishing that ceremony. In 2014, we finished it. It took a couple years for us to get everything together that we needed. We had to make new dresses or borrow dresses. We had to get new men's regalia or borrow men's regalia. We even had to relearn dance protocol, camp protocol for that matter. So it definitely took a community effort with us working together to move forward in 2014 to finish, to close out that ceremony that was interrupted because of the massacre. But we did it, and it was a great day. There were people from all over who came and participated. We had folks who had been part of the cleanup of the island, for example, all the way to those who supported and mentored us through relearning our traditional ways of conducting ceremony. It was a good day. I was there that day, and some of our young people who are now older people were there that day, and I look forward to our next ceremony on the island. After the ceremony in 2014 was finished, it was a relief. It was happiness. It was community. And then life went on again. And as you settle in and settle down and start moving on with life, you start thinking of, what do I do next? What do we do next? And what did we do? We reached out to the city of Eureka again because they still had land on the island. 270 acres, plus or minus. And we asked them for that. And again, it was a lot of work because we had a whole new city council we had to work with. We had a whole new city council that we had to educate and talk about and work through some of their concerns. Remember, these are folks who were educated on our public school system who often didn't learn a lot about Indigenous people, let alone Wiyot people. So working with them, staff, tribal council, and their city council members, we started building relationship with them again. We started educating again. And it seems like we do that a lot, but that's okay, because again, sometimes our school system doesn't talk about Indigenous people or even specific tribal people from where you grow up. So in 2019, the city of Eureka transferred back the rest of the land that was held by the city to us. We now are the majority landholder of the island Tolawut. And that is amazing. Because really we're not going to do a lot with it. Remember I said we can't do a lot with it. So remember, we can't build even on that 270 acres, nor the 40 acres that we got before, or even the 1.5 acres. We can build in the footprints of what's already there. That's why if you drive across the Samoa Bridge, you'll see that our building is still sitting there. You'll see that the boat dock is still there. So if something were to happen to that building, we could rebuild on that footprint. If we hope to one day rebuild or put in a brand new boat dock so that when we bring our boats out there, people of all kinds of ability can get in and out of the boat and get onto the dock and come onto the island. As far as I know, there aren't any structures on the city of Eureka land, so that will remain as is. So the restoration that we can do on those portions are native plants to make sure that there's habitat for our animals and our plants, both from the water and on land. And there are other people living on the island right now. And if we were to ever acquire those parcels of land, then we could rebuild on those footprints. But really, because that island is in the middle of the bay and because it's the center of our world, I don't imagine that we'll have a lot of activity on it other than what we already do, which is ceremony. Some of the things that we did for fun might include storytelling. Some of them were traditional stories and that we do have recordings of, but some of them might be more inappropriate stories. And those are usually told among adults or told in a way as an innuendo so that the young folks might not understand what's exactly going on. But we love to make each other laugh, and we still do that today. The gambling or stick game is called Gutsibi. And you might see a demonstration of that at one of our Wiyot celebration days. Sometimes we put one on and sometimes we don't. Let's see, another game that we played and still play, again, you might see it at Wiyot celebration day one year, is a game where it's sort of played on a field, or mostly sand, because it can be a tough game where you tackle each other over a ball or shinny, and it's basically kind of keep away and scoring a goal. But it can get pretty rough, so it's not for the faint of heart. Another activity that we like to do is our annual Wiyot Celebration Day, which happens the fourth Saturday of every August. So please do join us. You can find out more information on the tribe's website, and everyone is welcome. Wiyot people, Wiyot descended people, non-Wiyot people, non-native people, we open it up to everybody to come and share and celebrate with us what we've done the past year. You get to learn about what the tribe does. Information tables are there. We often have gambling games or stick games. We have songs, storytelling, food, of course. And it's a really fun day to get together with family and friends. So please join us.